Sorry
Sure.
for having to do that, but
No, that's quite all right. It's a good thing.
Okay. Oh, it is. Oh, I better go distribute the stream then. Make it so our Facebook friends cannot avoid us. That's our distribution model here. Da, 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 da. Hey, Tim, if
Yes,
for
sir.
Chris's benefit, why don't you express a few of your talents and things that you do, and that way we'll know better how to talk to you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know about talents. I can say I've been blessed, but I am the chief engineer and technical director for the Vol Radio Network, which distributes University of Tennessee football, basketball, women's basketball, baseball games. That's my second job. My first job is chief engineer of the two stations owned and operated by the University of Tennessee, which is where I'm at. WUOT, which is an NPR affiliate, celebrates 75 years next year. WTK is a student station. They celebrated 42 years this year. I've been involved in the broadcast side of radio since 1986. My first job was babysitting a 50 kilowatt RCA plate modulated AM transmitter for what was then WIVK AM. It was a 3-tower directional running 50 kilowatts. I'm a 50-year plus ham radio operator. When I am not involved in broadcast or playing ham radio, I have a 65 Mustang that I've nicknamed Sally, that I call that my Mustang therapy to get away from everything. Yeah, thank you very much. I've been very blessed to get to participate for these many years in a job that I grew up wanting to have. I toured WIVK when I was 10 years old, met the man who would eventually hire me, Milton Jones, who, by the way, is still with us, 102 years young, and have been fortunate to get to do something that I truly love. And that's probably way more than you wanted to hear.
That's perfect.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
I was busy clicking buttons. Did you mention much about ham radio?
I've had my ham license since I was 13 years old. I own and operate about 18 or 19 amateur radio repeaters in the East Tennessee area. This is a shameless promotional plug, so forgive me, but it's www.wb4gbi.com. Is my website. Awesome. It will take you and show you pictures of all the repeaters and where they're at, the towers they're on, the equipment they're using, a little bit of history if I know the history on them. I had two great fellas help me put that website together, and it looks a whole lot better than the one I built.
WB4GBI? Okay.
WB4GBI, Whiskey Bravo 4 Golf Bravo India, or Great Big Idiot.
Okay. Suncats, maybe you could have that website at the ready if we want to call for that. So, yeah,
sure. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, it's camera preview. Show hide
I'll
chat.
be glad to
Here
pop
we
it
go.
in. I can pop it in there.
Go.
No problem. Oh,
see if that worked.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. It is top of the hour. It's time to start. So we're all here. Awesome. Good. Suncast, I believe I'm about ready with episode number 701. Can you believe that? Oh, my goodness. Okay, here we go. It's top of the hour, 4 o'clock in the Central Time Zone, 5 o'clock Eastern Time, and 2 o'clock on the West Coast. You mountain folks have got to figure out your own time, somewhere between those two. Getting ready for episode 701. If you're watching live, thanks for joining us and putting up with us making some sausage. And we're about to hit the mark here where we will hit the edit and start the show. We'll start This Week in Radio Tech in 3, 2. Uh-oh, what was all that noise?
Was my
Timmery.
phone getting a text message? My apologies.
Okay, no worries. All right, here we go. In 3, 2. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. So delighted that you're here with us. It's episode 701 of TWiRT, and I'm here in the Nashville office of the Telos Alliance in the studio here. Appreciate Telos Alliance giving me an hour and a half off every Thursday afternoon to have a lot of fun and bring you some interesting people in the world of radio broadcast engineering and maybe some affiliated arts. It's a beautiful day here in Nashville, and I'm excited because he's here. He exists. Ladies and gentlemen, from Muckwonago, Wisconsin, it's my buddy and yours, Chris Tarr. Chris, welcome in.
Hello there. Glad to be here. I was just came back. I'm in my living room right now. I came back yesterday from Quincy, Illinois. I was at the Gates Air Factory. There was an SBE Ennis workshop for the local SBE chapter there. So I did a presentation on EAS and also the mentor program for SBE. So it was a lot of fun. I got to drive down day before yesterday. We've been dealing with a heat wave here, so it was hot. It was in the 90s here. On the way down to Quincy, went yesterday, and it actually turned out really well. I had a Fax 3 kilowatt transmitter that needed some work, so I said to my boss, I'm going to save you some money on shipping. I'm just going to take the thing down there and drop it off at the service bay. So that's exactly what I did. So I went down and spent time down there. I came back last night, and here I am today. Glad to be here, just trying to get rested up for my little trip.
I can see you walking in there and pounding that down on the table and saying, I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler, or something like that.
Oh, they were great. I mean, I've worked with the Gates Air people, obviously, for years and years, 20 some years.
Yeah.
So they were great. They came out with a cart. They unloaded it out of my car for me. It's just it's a couple of packages. But they came and unloaded it out of my car for me and took care of the whole thing. It was like royalty. It was great. Fantastic.
It's been so long. The last time I was at, it was Harris at the time. It was in Ohio, right? Near Mason, Ohio. So what are they doing in Quincy? Are they doing all the radio stuff in Quincy?
Yeah, I mean, Quincy was the original home of Gates
right
early on. In fact, they have Percy Gates Drive and that sort of thing. So yeah, the Imagine Communications and Gates Air stuff goes on there. That's still where they do the manufacturing. And they also, that's where they have something called the Broadcast Technology Training Center. Now, way back in 2000, 2001, they used to do RF training classes. So I did their 2 years worth of their training classes down there. So, it's been a while since I've been there, but I've been there before. Great facility, really, really nice people down there. Great place. I recommend. And actually, you can, they do tours. You can stop by and you can do the whole thing. BE's down there. I think Nautel actually has an office down there too.
Wow. It's been years since I've been to Quincy, and you took a transmitter there to be repaired. Guess what I had repaired in Quincy, Illinois?
Transmitter.
No, an airplane.
Oh, really? Well,
Go ahead.
It's interesting because the other time, it's great having these guys kind of nearby. I remember one time, again, this speaks volumes to the people who work there. I had an FM 3.5K transmitter, lost a blower. Didn't have a backup transmitter at this station. They had somebody there overnight at their shipping department waiting for me at the dock. I drove down there, showed up at 2 a.m, got the blower, and was able to drive back and get it on the air by morning drive.
Oh my goodness. I flew
they're good people there.
I just got my license. I flew a Cessna 172 up to Quincy from Memphis, where I lived, and high over St. Louis, the vacuum pump died, and that means my directional gyro died. I was in VFR conditions, so I just looked out the window and kept flying, so it wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
But and so I landed there, called the FBO that owned the airplane and that rented me the airplane. I said, here's what happened. They said, see if they'll fix it there. And they did. $500 later, all good. So
nice.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah, great town. Great town.
All right. Speaking of, by the way, do you know why they put the airport so far outside of Quincy?
No idea.
That's where all the planes were coming in. I was hoping
Oh
Suncast would be
boy.
standing by with a, but I'm. There we
I don't
go.
even know if it
Thank
was worthy. I don't even know if it was worthy of that. I mean, come on, man.
you.
I
We
would have
can
just
create
turned
the
off
impression
your
that it
camera at
was.
that point. Yeah. I would, if I was
All
him,
right.
I would have disconnected you at that point.
All right. Speaking of someone who's worthy, as or more than you or I, Chris, and guess who's with us? It's Tim Berry. Tim from Knoxville, Tennessee. Tim, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm sorry you had to be here today, the same day I am, but welcome in. Good to see you.
Thank you. What an honor it is to be here. I'm really thrilled. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for agreeing to be with us. We got a really cool topic today. And Tim, tell us real quick what you do and where you're at, and then we'll jump into a quick announcement from Nautel, and then we'll be on our way into the show. Tell us about Tim Berry.
Well, like almost all of us that are in this industry, I wear several hats. My full-time job in the office that I'm in now is chief engineer for the two stations owned and operated by the University of Tennessee, WUOT-FM, an NPR affiliate, and WUTK, which is our student station. Um, my second job, if you will, is chief engineer of the Vol Radio Network. I've been getting Tennessee sports on the air for 33 years, 6 years in the studio before that. I do some contract work as well. And if that wasn't bad enough, I have ham radio for a hobby. But just been very blessed. Glad to be here. Thanks for asking.
Well, we got a cool topic that I think you are particularly good at. And by the way, that Vol Radio Network, I know if you live outside of Tennessee, it may not mean that much to you. Me, I'm not a big sports fan myself, but oh my goodness, I know a lot of people. There are orange jackets and cars and trucks and beanies and all kinds of stuff around my world for the orange being the color of the University of Tennessee Volunteers. And my goodness, it seems like the Vol Radio Network is practically as big, probably bigger actually, than let's say WSM's Grand Ole Opry. I mean, if you're a Tennessean or you live anywhere within 3-4 hours drive of Knoxville, Tennessee, you either listen to the Vol Radio Network or you know somebody who does, right?
We have, at my last recollection, about 60 plus affiliates for football, a little less than that for basketball, although basketball is increasing. At one time, we had close to 80 affiliates, most of which are in the state of Tennessee, but quite a few are not. And of course, that doesn't count the streaming audience through utsports.com or through, oh, my mind just went blank. I'm sorry. But we have a fairly substantial streaming audience as well.
Gotcha. Well, it's a big deal, and therefore, what you do, including preparing for what you do, is also a big deal, and that's one of the things we're going to be talking about. Preparation is a big topic for today. We'll get into all that in just a minute. Hey, real quick, our show is brought to you in part by Nautel, and Nautel, you know, from their transmitters, AM and FM transmitters, but they got a cool thing going on. In fact, I'm about to see my Nautel transmitter tomorrow. I'm going to one of my Nautel transmitters. I'm going to Oxford, Mississippi, to check up on a Nautel transmitter that is over 10 years old, but now it's been pressed into FM plus HD service, which I think is just as cool as can be. Well, Nautel has this cool thing going on. It's called the Nautel HD Digital Radio Test Drive. And the test drive is offering, it's an offering intended to break the barriers between broadcasters and HD radio. In other words, it's going to make it easier for you as a broadcaster to try out HD radio. HD transmission has the potential to create a presence on the car dashboard that you just can't get without HD. And it'll help stations stay competitive in a field of alternative media choices. It's based on Nautel's software-based air chain technology. This is pretty cool. That's what we're doing. HD Digital Radio Test Drive allows broadcasters to try HD radio transmission in your market for up to 6 months to unlock listeners and content and new revenue potential without needing to install and purchase upwards of $40,000 or $50,000 of HD gear. So it's an easy, minimal cost option to turn on HD radio for your station. And you can try out new revenue generating opportunities. Obviously get your sales staff involved in selling these added opportunities, graphics on the dashboard, and HD2 and 3 and even 4 transmissions. You can experiment with new formats, maybe new languages. Maybe you've got a Hispanic audience in your market that you're not serving, and by golly, you could. That would be a good way to do it. You can counter competing alternate media. You know who I'm talking about, the other guys that are on the dashboard. And here's what you need to get started. You lease or purchase a GV2 transmitter from Nautel, or you upgrade your GV transmitter to a GV2. You get an Xperi main station or equivalent license, and a signed trial agreement with Nautel. And then you produce some content, 1 to 4 channels, delivered via LiveWire or AES 67. So you got different ways to get this done and lots of ways to try this out. Contact your Nautel rep. For a lot of you in the middle of the country, that is Jeff Welton. But contact your Nautel rep to get yourself started on this digital radio test drive from Nautel. Thanks, Nautel, for supporting and really pushing hard to promote the terrestrial broadcast industry. Really appreciate you. All right, Tim Berry is our guest. Tim, we were talking a few weeks ago about prepping for the upcoming sports season in the fall, and right now, fall seems a mile away. Here we are at the summer solstice, but it'll kind of be here before you know it. But prepping for it, you can't start ordering some equipment or replacement gear on August 4th. To get your first football game on the air on August 14th. So we're here to talk about prep, not only prep for the sports season, but also for other equipment installations. And you're going to talk about that. And I'd like to also bring in the conversation about the ABIP, the Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program, because you were out on one of those just yesterday. And that's another way of being prepared to not have an inspection from the FCC. So
Indeed.
Let's start with that with the whole sports thing, since you are responsible for plenty of that. Where does your mind go in the summer when you got to think about thousands and thousands and thousands of listeners in just a few weeks from now?
Well, the first thing that will happen is soon after the season is over with, the people who hold the rights to broadcast the games will not only solicit the Vol Network, but the other networks for which they have rights to, and asked if there are any capital expenditures that you need to make. This is, of course, at that time, a good time to ask for bigger ticket items like codecs, backup data devices. Every sports network now, at least the ones that I am familiar with, are doing IP-based audio transmission, and therefore IP codecs are a necessity. It's also a good idea to have an alternate means to get your programming to its final destination, be it a extra IP codec, be it an extra device like the Max Connect devices that work over cellular data, something to get your programming there. Any other capital expense items are usually considered around that time. Once you get past the financial part, then it becomes the planning and logistics. Those of us who do sports events are mostly familiar with the venues that we're going to be involved with within our conference. Like, for example, the Southeastern Conference. I've been to all the venues that they have. I have some idea what their facilities are going to be like. What I don't know is if our powers that be within the university schedule a game at a neutral site or at a venue that I've not been to before. For example, this year we're playing a game at the NFL stadium in Charlotte. Now, the good news is I've been there before, so I know what the facilities are like. And in that case, you're wondering things like the most obvious, where's the radio booth at? In recent times, radio booths have been moved to positions within the stadium that are not favorable to the folks that are trying to call the game. By that, I mean either the end zone or nearly in the end zone. So if that's the case and you know that your talent's going to be placed in an area that's not going to be a good sightline for him, then you better make sure that you have access to the truck video feed to help him and the spotters and the color analyst be able to see the game. That's the most obvious consideration. The second consideration is how you would plan to tie into the facilities that the house has. By that, I mean referees feed, PA feed. You would want to have, you would hope that the house, meaning the existing facility, would have a means to connect you to the TV truck for not only the video that we just spoke of, but to get an effects feed of the parabolic mics and the microphones that most of the audio folks will share with you to help your broadcast sound better. Lastly, in a facility like that, if the TV crew that is producing the game would like to have audio from you with your play-by-play announcer describing the last score, they will want to be able to interface to you for that as well. So your planning process begins with the venue you're going to. Are you familiar with it? If you are not, can you find someone, perhaps the home radio guy or someone within your circle of contacts that has been to that venue that can tell you about it? That's where planning begins. Then once you get past that, then the logistics of how am I going to get my equipment to the venue? For some of us, we merely load it in the back of our vehicle and we drive there in advance because always you want to try to set up, if you can, at least the day before a football broadcast. Basketball is not as much, is not so critical, but football is definitely critical. A day before is always a good thing. So how are you going to get your equipment there? I'm fortunate in that the university here supports our network to the extent that if I get my equipment, which is several cases worth, to the equipment truck on Wednesday before the game, they'll transport it for me. And not only that, the student managers will deliver that equipment for me to the booth, which is usually a long way from the locker room where they stop at. And the white hair usually will give it away that I'm not a spring chicken. So having to push 4 or 5 cases worth of equipment up several inclines or pull up a flight of stairs like I've had to do before is not something I look forward to. So logistics come into play. Once the equipment's there, then having the adequate time to set up. If it's a venue you're not familiar with, then making acquaintances with the facilities folks to get the necessary feeds that I just described a moment ago and be ready. Another thing to consider is most sports broadcasts have a pregame show. That pregame show may or may not be on location, which means you may or may not be looking at a completely separate setup out in a public place outside the stadium where they'll have a live audience and prepare for that. And how is that going to interface with your the rest of your sports broadcast? Planning also involves frequency coordination. Almost all of us now are using sideline equipment. All of the Southeastern Conference venues and all of the NFL venues have a frequency coordinator, a great guy to speak with well in advance, not the day before the game, well in advance to tell him what equipment you have, make sure that they can accommodate a space for you in the RF spectrum for which your equipment operates in, to have that cleared and done before you actually get to the venue. Post game, a lot of networks are recording their interviews with their respective coaches or players, but some of us, our network included, are still doing our interviews with the coach and the players live. That means another setup that at least sends a send and return back to your primary setup in your booth. So a football broadcast is probably the most complicated thing that I've been involved with in my 30 plus years of doing this, because of the many facets of it and the interfaces that you have to make with numerous entities and people to make sure that your broadcast is a success. A very long answer to a very short question. Sorry.
No, you covered so much stuff there. Chris Tarr, you work for a company that's got a bunch of radio stations now. I'm not involved with any sports broadcasting at my stations, or if we are, we're just taking a satellite feed for for a smaller college like in Mississippi. Chris, how do your experiences jibe with or mesh with what Tim's talking about?
It made me think about many years ago when I was working for Next Media, and they opened up the Chicagoland Speedway, and we were handling the NASCAR races there, and it was very much the same thing. A lot of the same steps to set up a broadcaster there. It's a huge, huge undertaking, and I would start 6 months out getting planned for this, and it's 2 weekends a year, and there's so many moving parts like we're talking about with return feeds and, trying to get different sources of audio, getting antennas up at the top of the stands, audio up into the boxes there. We were in center field, so, we had to set up and be able to have people roam all over the facilities with wireless headsets and not only could talk, but be able to receive audio as well. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of these bigger events, they take a lot of planning, a lot of work, a lot of frequency coordination. Nowadays with the stuff that I'm doing with sports, I mean, it's mostly just, Max Connect and either, Lucy Live or Comrex access units or something like that. But, the bigger events like the racetrack, I remember, and then I would live the entire like Thursday through Sunday. I'd basically live at the track, and that's all I did was sleep out there and run the race. So, but on the other hand, it's so rewarding when those broadcasts go off without a hitch, and they sound good on the air, and people love them, and really, we're not the stars of that. The talent who do the shows are the stars, but it's a good feeling to know that you're that unsung hero making it all happen, and you take a lot of pride in that.
I got a bunch of follow-up questions. And I'm sorry, Tim, why don't you go ahead and then I'll say what I was going to say. Go ahead, please.
I was to follow up on what Chris was saying. One of the nicest compliments I've ever received was a talk show host that does our afternoon drive talk show on one of the news talk stations that is also in the same cluster affiliated with the Vol Network. Told me that when he listens to a broadcast, he feels like he's at the game. That means that I have provided the right amount of crowd sound. The mix for the play-by-play announcer and talent is good. The sideline reporter's good. Everything comes together. And that was a high compliment that he paid when he said, I feel like I'm at the game.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And I got a feeling that, Tim, in the radio business, we're doing this for a tiny fraction of the budget that the TV people are spending. Although that may be changing because TV's doing a lot of remote production. So we'll get into that. Okay, so I've got a question before our next spot break. So let's hit one question because I had a lot of things to unpack from all the stuff you said. I could ask a lot of specifics, but let me ask this: when you're at home, do you consider what the away sports broadcasters what their needs are going to be? In other words, do you accommodate them, or is that your job or somebody else's job? And then by the same token, when you go on the road and you are having to use whatever's being provided to you, do you feel like generally it's well provided, or they just don't care about us and we got to fend for ourselves every time we go to, X city or Y city, we're really on our own? How does that reciprocal relationship work out?
That is a great question. I'm going to put in the chat window real quick, if I can type and talk at the same time, a website that I'm glad you asked about. In the Southeastern Conference, we have a group of broadcasters that meet at the basketball tournament in March, that we all help each other. We all make sure that our facilities within the Southeastern Conference have the facilities that we need to do a radio broadcast. So the short answer is yes, I'm very concerned with when a visitor comes to a venue that I'm responsible for, to make sure that they have at least a couple of internet feeds, that they have feeds back and forth to their respective locker rooms, I get them in touch with the frequency coordinator. What you're seeing is the website that I built several years back. I need to take the coming soon off because Texas and Oklahoma are now officially with us. But if you click any one of those, particularly I can speak to mine, it will take you to a subpage where each of our respective sports venues are mentioned: football, basketball, baseball, and this year I'm adding ladies softball to it. What you see is the equipment or the complement of items that are in our booth, that when you come into our booth are things that you, the engineer, need to know. Where are your IP connections? What do they look like?
Look at that.
You're going to set up in a facility that perhaps you've never been to before. So you can see what is there for visitor radio before you ever get there and have an idea. I cover everything from the IP feeds to what jacks in the patch bay you need to plug into to get your referee, your crowd feed. If I get a crowd feed straight from the TV truck, which is always my goal, the first thing I will do is put a splitter transformer on that and feed visiting radio, and if we have one that week, national radio, so that they get the exact same effects feed that I do. On the website, of course, is the contact information for our frequency coordinator. So if they have RF gear, that gives them a place to go. On the site is also, where do you park? What gate will you enter the stadium at, and what time are you allowed to be there? And for most of our venues now, post 9/11, there's also a lockdown time in which they will expect you to vacate the stadium if you're setting up the day before the game. So again, long answer to a short question.
That is awesome. What a great service. This is primarily for SEC teams, right? Because that's what it says.
But
SEC
let's say, for
radio
example, that we have a team that's coming to play in one of our venues from another conference. Somebody that maybe has never been to an SEC school before. Not only can they look up Tennessee's information, but they can look up any school in the conference that has provided that information to me. And I usually ask for it at the beginning of football and the beginning of basketball season. Send me your most current stuff and I'll put it on the website for you. And a lot of visitors that have been to our venues at Tennessee have remarked that, yes, I use that to check on another school as well. And they were appreciative of it.
Now, one thing that's behind a credentialed login would be the secret handshake.
Oh, there's no secret handshake. The information that's there is for everyone.
Hey, it's Kirk Harnack and Chris Tarr. We're talking to Tim Barry. This is just really interesting. I've already learned so much. We got plenty more questions and things to talk about. Talking about prep and planning, and oh my goodness, what a great service to let other broadcasters know what they can expect when they come to your stadium, and reciprocally, you'll know what to expect when you go to their stadium or their sports venue. We're going to take a quick break for Broadcast Bionics and the Camera One program, and we'll be right back after this.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics, designed to bring video to your audio content, visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need one camera for a studio wide shot and usually one camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature, or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them and post. Camera One is a user installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
Thanks to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And remember all the other cool things that Broadcast Bionics has. Just awesome. Thanks a lot, Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We really appreciate you, as does the broadcast industry, at least those who have used your stuff. Hey, we're talking to Tim Berry. Chris Tarr is along here. Tim Berry is the chief engineer for WUOT and also for WUTK, and the engineer for the Vol Radio Network with 60-plus affiliates. We're talking about planning. Tim, you answered a bunch of my questions there with that website about SEC Radio Recip. That's great. I didn't realize that they might put radio play-by-play people not at the 50-yard line where they could really see what's going on. Are you kidding me? Where are they sending us out to the back alleys to call the game?
Well, during the pandemic, a lot of play-by-play of sports broadcast was done in a remote studio. In our case here at Tennessee, we were not traveling during basketball season. Most of those games were carried on either the SEC network or ESPN, who, of course, owns the SEC network along with the SEC. There is a direct fiber feed to each one of the Southeastern Conference member schools. What we would do is get a fiber video feed from the venue where our team was playing. The only problem with that is, of course, there is some inherent latency, and we purchased, along with several other schools, a delay device that would allow us to delay an effects feed that was sent to us by the school by which we're playing. For example, let's say that Tennessee was playing Florida. The Florida engineer, Steve Egan, would graciously set up one of my Comrex access boxes and give me what we call the effects feed, which is the mix of the bucket mics, the floor mics, and what have you from the TV truck, and feed it exclusively into my access. Well, that audio is going to arrive to my access on the receive end a lot quicker than the video will. At that point, what I was doing was inserting a delay. Bob Horner, who was the engineer for Vanderbilt for many years, found this box, and we all ordered one that would basically, it's not a broadcast delay like you think of a 25/7 or Symmetrics or Eventide or what have you, but it was meant to be a consumer audio delay. And we would use those to delay our effects feed to match the video. The play-by-play talent, of course, is watching the video. So when they see the football player score or the basketball go in the bucket, they're going to describe that. And the goal of the delay is to match the effects feed of the bucket mics to be at the same time that the video shows the ball going through the bucket. And that's what we had to do at that point. I hope that we don't arrive at the point in a lot of live sports venues where we are forced to do that merely because of logistics. But a lot of these sports venues, of course, are revenue driven. Executive suites and large donor suites sell for large amounts of money. And because of that, suite or areas that might have been used for broadcast purposes might be repurposed for such, shall we say, donors, people that are contributing a lot of money to whatever that venue is or the sponsoring university or whatever. And therefore the sports guys are misplaced or displaced.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that brings up the question then of what is called in TV REMI production, remote integration, REME, remote integration production, and that's been very popular. Well, I mean, it was really accelerated by COVID, but it's still going on. And hey, even before COVID, I was in Australia one time, went to a radio station, a big station in Sydney, Australia, and I was shown into a room that had an enormous television and a table with four headsets and announcer mics and things. And I said, "What's this?" Oh, well, this is where our announcers sit to call the game. So really, they're not going to Perth or Melbourne or something. Nope, they sit right here. They get a special feed with obviously no commercials, and they get a lot of slow-mo playback and all the things that they really need to see. Has your world gone into much of that, even post-COVID?
Somewhat. I think COVID was a driving factor in accelerating that. There were numerous broadcasts that, and let me back up just briefly, if I may. Um, all of the Southeastern Conference schools have a production facility on campus that is capable of doing a sports broadcast without the necessity of a production truck. The scale of broadcast that they could do varies, of course, with the venue and what equipment they have. But in that case, most of which involved around basketball, the talent for those games were usually at their home office. So our production center here, called the Ray Hand Center, had to be capable of accommodating that, or worst case, placing them, like you said, in a secluded room with a large monitor where they call it there. So we have seen that. From the radio side of things, I can tell you that the um, biggest caveat to radio, if you will, was that if you're asking the audio guy who's on site, who we refer to as the A2, the A1 being the person who's actually at the console mixing the game, if you ask the A2 for an effects feed, you may well get one, but what you're getting is a feed that is sent back to you from wherever the production end of the Remy is. In most of the SEC games, I think that was Charlotte. So you would be getting a effects mix back from Charlotte that would have your bucket mics and your floor mics and such, and there would be some latency there. If you're a purist, you would probably notice it. The average listener may or may not notice that the ball goes through the bucket as the play-by-play announcer says this the shot is good. But in this case, that was going to be all you would get because there was no local way for that A2 person to split off an effects feed and give to you, because all of the sources were being sent to the Remy to be mixed there.
Let's return just a bit to the technicalities, and I'd like for Chris to chime in. Chris mentioned Lucy, as in Lucy Live, as one of the methods of getting audio over IP from a remote site. Comrex is often mentioned. Tieline is a popular brand. Of course, my employer, Telos Alliance, makes some codecs as well. There are things that are WebRTC based, like Clean Feed. That's popular. We've interviewed those folks here on the show. There's also Telos Alliance makes an audio console called the Axia Altus that, as an option, can have WebRTC built in. You send somebody a link, and they're on a phone or a laptop or even a Chromebook, and they can participate fully two-way. The codec is like built into your laptop. Tim, what are some of the things that you look for in an IP connected device or system that's going to get you good audio, two-way, low latency? What are some of the factors that are interesting to you?
Well, the answer to that would be a lot would depend on the complexity of the broadcast. For example, our broadcasters are out right now covering the College World Series. Tennessee's about to play in the Baseball College World Series. In that case, a simple codec with either a sidecar with one or two inputs in it, or like you mentioned, a mixing console that was specifically meant to deliver USB audio to a laptop and then to a codec within the laptop, that could be used. In my case, for football and basketball broadcasts, I will stick with a mixer that's external and have a completely mixed product going into the codec, be it Tieline,
Mm-hmm.
Comrex, or whomever. But if I'm working with a smaller station or a smaller group that doesn't need 24 inputs to mix a football game, then obviously a simple solution will be much easier and will not necessitate someone with an engineering background that has to set it up. Your play-by-play announcer can set that up and be self-sufficient, which is, of course, is an economic savings. As far as the quality of the codec in particular, I have used Lucy. I have it on my phone. I've used both Comrex and Tieline products. I would say that any codec you use is only as good as the algorithm that it supports. If it supports a higher bitrate algorithm and is compatible with the device on the other end, then so much more the better. If not, then you're seeking the lowest common denominator of the particular two codecs to communicate with each other. That could be as low a common denominator as a SIP-based phone call. It could be G.722, what we all remember from the early days of Switch 56 service. So it's dependent on the two devices involved. I have used a Lucy codec, or I have used my laptop with an app in it to provide a backup feed. If worst case scenario, I lose my primary codec, be it a broadcast compatible codec, if you will, a broadcast specific codec. I will use a device that is on a hopefully separate network. Like in the case of Lucy, it would be the cellular network, and deliver audio in a oh my gosh, I've lost my primary internet feed scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, I wonder if you could talk about what criteria are important to you. I mean, in some ways, audio codecs have become pretty ubiquitous. I mean, it used to be that, it was always between Comrex or Tieline, or maybe it was ISDN using a Telos product. But everywhere's got IP now, at least almost everywhere. Chris, what's your criteria or experience for these remote broadcasts?
Well, the most important thing is I always send people out in advance because, it's all IP now. We don't do, phones or ISDN or anything else. So we need to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're going to have reliable main and backup IP capacity. So, that's a matter, of seeing what the venue has available. Is it shared? Is it, obviously we don't want to be on public Wi-Fi during a game when everybody, has their phones on the Wi-Fi network. So can we get, wired connection to the private network? Our cellular modems, like the hotspots and the Max Connects, can we get a signal there? How good is the signal? And then, of course, there's a transport back and forth. So, the other thing that we do, which is a little unusual, is we produce the entire game from the site. So we don't have anybody back at the studio inserting commercials or anything else. We do all of that now that we're doing IP. We're doing all of that from the venue. So, there's computers involved and some mixing equipment and that sort of thing. But, really the big thing is to get out in advance and do your homework and know where you're going to be, know what connectivity is available for you, test it out, make sure it works, those sorts of things. Because we've been burned where they haven't done that and they get out there and we can't get a good connection. The audio sounds horrible because it keeps dropping packets or whatever, because we can't get there. So, that's the golden rule.
That sounds like our topic, which is planning. You got to know what you're gonna jump into, and it's a little. I'm not saying it's hard to believe, but it's a little bit surprising that there are still places where we seem like we can't get quality internet service of at least 2 to 5 megabits per second, which is plenty for audio. You'd think that we ought to be able to get reliable internet service out to a stadium, to a press box, it seemed, to an arena,
Well,
courtside.
I,
Mhm.
I think in my case, we do a lot of high school sports, so
Yeah.
they don't really, because that's the other thing uh we run into is they, because it's a school, they lock down their firewalls like crazy. So oftentimes we can't even get through the firewall to get audio out. We have to have them make exceptions. They don't know what they're dealing with broadcast stuff. So we run into that a lot as well. We have to figure out a way to traverse their firewall. And I'm not a big fan of using relay servers because, we're relying on third party hardware to get the connection through that. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of work we have to do with that. And then, you know, in terms of testing for crowds with cellular, our policy typically is to use the Max Connect when we can because that's prioritized data. So our data gets ahead of everybody else's. Otherwise, we really don't know, how it's going to perform at the time when there's a huge crowd there. Fortunately, with high school sports, it's also a lot of, we don't normally go to a venue we've never been before. So a lot of times
Mhm.
we'll be able to determine, and to be perfectly honest, you're only talking about, 64 to 128K of data. So generally, even when there's a crowd there on cellular, you can squeeze that through. Wi-Fi I found actually isn't as forgiving as cellular would be in this situation. So,
Yeah.
that's the thing is, again, the rule number one has always been our own network connection, not a shared one. So that's either, plugging into the venue's office network or using Max Connect where we've got priority data.
Hey, we got to take a quick break here. This is all great information, and yes, high school is a whole kind of different ball of wax because, one reason might be that the high school is not getting paid thousands of dollars, for the broadcast rights, or maybe they are. It might Texas football is a big thing. Hey, we'll find out more about that coming up. It's This Week in Radio Tech. It's Kirk Harnack, Chris Tarr, and Tim Barry is our guest, and our show is brought to you in part by Broadcasters General Store and the terrific folks at Innovonics.
The 677 Triple Tuner is a monitor receiver in a compact half-rack package. It has 3 built-in SDR-based frequency agile tuners, each one programmable for AM, FM, or weather band reception. Each receiver has a balanced monaural XLR output to provide audio to an EAS monitor or off-air monitor throughout the broadcast facility. It has self-logging alarms that constantly check for audio loss, low signal, RDSPI mismatch, and EAS alert tones. Online alarm notifications alert personnel with email or SMS messages. The dynamic web interface provides control and monitoring remotely via any web-enabled device. In addition, the 677 has remote listening available via a web stream. It allows up to 10 simultaneous stream listeners, and SNMP is fully supported. Of course, the most important feature for any radio receiver is its reception quality. The 677 handles this like a pro by incorporating a modern SDR-based design for excellent signal-to-noise ratios and rejection even in the most challenging conditions. The 677 is simple to set up with front panel OLED menu and jog wheel, giving you access to 3 selectable tuners. In addition, a built-in web server provides expanded remote setup, operation control, and remote audio monitoring via internet stream. On the front of the 677, there's an LED bar meter to indicate audio output levels, a headphone jack, and LED alarm indicators for each receiver. There's a large OLED display and jog wheel with intuitive menus for easy setup of the 3 receivers and editing over all programming parameters.
Pretty cool. Check it out from Broadcasters General Store. You can check in with Broadcasters General Store. I love these folks. You call them, they answer the phone. You email them, they answer your email. And they also have sharp pencils and good prices. So check them out at bgs.cc, bgs.cc. Thanks again, Innovonics and Broadcasters General Store for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Kirk Harnack, Chris Tarr, and Tim Berry are along here. And so, Tim, I guess we've pretty well covered this idea of internet access. It seems like at the college level, you guys have this covered pretty well. Very few problems there. I've been to the baseball stadium here in Nashville, where the Nashville Sounds play, AAA team, and they've got that very, very well covered. It's all very, very professional. And if you have something else to add to that, that's great. I think I'd like to move to our topic about planning for major projects. We talk about planning for sports. You got a transmitter installation coming up. I wonder if you could kind of detail some of the things that you're having to make sure you plan in advance for your transmitter installation.
Well, as you and I spoke about on the phone not too long ago, we alluded to a site where a transmitter was purchased and it literally would not fit in the building,
Right.
and modifications had to be made to the building. I was involved in a transmitter installation in which we were replacing a transmitter. It was dual 20 kilowatt FM transmitters with a combiner, and we went from one brand to another. And because of the way that the transmitters were assembled, we literally had to turn the whole installation 90 degrees to get the new transmitters to fit in the space of the old ones. We determined this by measuring the length between the transmitter itself, the RF filters, which in this case were external, and the combiner assembly, the 3dB hybrid combiner assembly that had to be in the appropriate place for those filters and RF plumbing to reach to. So logistics, size, secondarily, depending on if you're upgrading or getting a power increase or perhaps adding HD, power requirements. Do you have enough electrical service? If you are adding a transmitter to a venue and keeping the existing transmitter as an auxiliary or a backup, is your electrical service going to accommodate that? Is your air conditioning going to accommodate any additional heat load? As we all know, HD transmitters operate in Class AB as opposed to Class C. Efficiency is less. My Gates Airfax 40, which is running happily on Sharps Ridge in downtown Knoxville right now, is in the upper 50% efficiency because that's what's expected out of a Class AB amplifier. When that transmitter was installed, it replaced transmitters that were analog FM only, and heat load had to be considered. Do we have enough air? What am I trying to say? Air exchange on site to accommodate the additional heat load. Those things come to mind. Delivery of the transmitter. This is an honest to goodness true story, but one of the transmitters that I installed was delivered to one of my competitors by mistake because he called me on the phone and said, "You bought a new transmitter, haven't you?" As a matter of fact, yes, I have. He said, "Well, I have it. It's in my building. They're going to have to redeliver it to you." And I jokingly say that, but it actually did happen.
Oh my goodness! How do you plan for something like that? And Chris solves that problem just by going to the factory and picking it up himself. That's what he does.
Indeed. And they chuckle about
That's what I do.
buying stuff.
I make sure it gets to the right place that way.
That's right.
Well, and having been to a couple of Harris schools and having bought parts for them from them over the years, if you're going to order a part and you need to have it overnighted, your time frame better include the amount of time to get it from Quincy out to the airport.
Yep. Tim, it sounded like in the first part of your answer to planning for a transfer installation that a person might really want to have one of these handy, right? You want to measure and you know what I love about this one? It's calibrated in rack units. Isn't that cool?
Oh, nice.
This is from Middle Atlantic. Of course, you know who they are. Everybody in the broadcast business knows who they are. But yeah, they make a rack rule. Oh, I get this from OIB. Ohio Broadcasters gave me this. How about that? That must have been in one of the
Some nice
swag bags
right there.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
that's a nice piece of swag right there. It sure is. All right, so but you bring up a good point. It used to be that if you were going to go HD, 10, 20 years ago, you'd be thinking about a whole separate transmitter, maybe to feed a separate antenna or maybe to do high level combining. But now you got a transmitter that does both FM and HD. But nobody changed the laws of physics. It's that HD has to get amplified. And maybe the FM has to get amplified too in a less efficient way, not Class C, but as you mentioned, Class AB1. And that's going to throw off a ton more, take more electricity for the same output and throw off more heat. And you got to think about that. I hadn't really considered that. So even though if you're upgrading from FM to FM and HD and getting a new transmitter for it, you got to think about more electricity and more heat, don't you?
It's going to cost you more in electrical cost to deliver the same TPO for your analog side, not to mention your HD side. And a lot of that cost is not only going to be efficiency, but for example, if you get a power increase, if your transmitter installation includes a power increase, is your existing electrical service going to accommodate that? If you're going to install a transmitter, particularly if you're forced to install one in a hurry, which I have been, the electrician and the HVAC folks are your friends, and your friends need to be with you when this happens. We were forced into a situation in my earlier tenure here at the university where we had to replace a transmitter and have it on the air for the following Monday because this was at our auxiliary site, because our main site was going to be inaccessible to us. We leased tower space, and our leaseor was doing tower work. They already had the tower crew scheduled, and our auxiliary transmitter at that point was making more heat than it was RF. And when I did get the approval to install it, the delivery was the Friday before the Monday of our fund drive, in which we had already heavily promoted and were not going to be able to be on the air from our main site. So electricians and HVAC folks were standing by when I, like as Chris has already alluded to, hand delivered the transmitter in a moving truck to the site, and we went to work. We started at about 7 or 8 in the evening, and we put it on the air at about 3:00 that morning.
Wow. Chris, at this point, anything you'd like to add to this about planning for transmitter moves and heat loads and all that kind of jazz?
No, I mean, Tim really hit it on the head. Make friends with electricians nearby and HVAC guys. For example, one of my contract guys, his grandson is a master electrician, so he's great. I have him do all of our work. And, as I'm sure Tim would attest, a lot of these guys, if you haven't worked with them before, don't understand transmitters and heat loads, those sorts of things. So, you have to do a little education as well with how these things work and the care and feeding of them to make sure. I put in a transmitter a couple of years ago, HD, and, I thought, it was the heat load wasn't going to be a problem. I was wrong, which is unusual because I've put in a bunch of these. So I had to retrofit, but, make sure to have, these people ready and, that they understand, the logistics of broadcasts and how these things, have to go quickly. And not only that, but, we can't shut down the master power, so you can check something out just for the heck, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech. Tim Barry's our guest. Chris and I are here. And Tim, as usual, we're gonna be running out of time. We got one more a couple quick ads, and from our wonderful sponsors, and then we're gonna have a tip of the week. And Tim, I'll leave it up to you. As usual, I'm informing you at the last minute that I need a tip of the week from you, Tim. So we didn't get to the ABIP program, and Tim, I'm wondering if we ought to have maybe you and Larry Wilkins and maybe Tom Ray all on the same show talking about the ABIP program. That might be kind of interesting. What do you think?
I would be honored and privileged to do that. It's a very worthwhile program. And we speak of advanced planning by having your facility in compliance will certainly prevent a lot of miserable heartaches and some monetary forfatures down the road.
Chris, is ABIP something you guys have going on in Wisconsin?
Oh yeah, no, I go through the rounds a lot, and in fact, one of my jobs as a consultant is to help people prepare for those, and one of my contractors is one of the ABIP inspectors here. So I'm a big believer in it.
Well, good. We ought to plan a show around that and get you and the other experts on the show. It's This Week in Radio Tech. We got the tip of the week coming up, but that means it's time for Chris to tell us about something at Angry Audio. You know, Chris, they're shipping some stuff now we've been talking about for a while. I didn't know they weren't shipping them, but they are now. So what would you like to tell us about, Chris?
Well, the Rave console is shipped. There's a new Max Connect box that's shipping now. But one of the things I want to talk about, because this has really been kind of surprising how popular this has become, is the software that they have. Now I'm going to bring it up here in my end so I can remember what it's all the little things about it. But it's the C6S software processor.
Oh yeah,
and what it is it's a Chameleon processor in software. I mean, this thing is amazing. Now you can do it for live streaming. You can use it as a plugin. It comes with a VST plugin, so that you can use it with your favorite audio editor. We were talking earlier, Kirk, earlier about Ableton. It works in that. It works in pretty much anything that'll take a VST plugin, and it has all of the tools that you would find in a Chameleon, including some interesting controls. They have things like detail, lows, highs. You can set levels using LUFS, which is really interesting for studio recording. But basically, this thing really gives a really good sound. It's the same kind of algorithm that they pack in their hardware, but it's software based. So you can use this as a standalone processor for processing, on-air streams. I know a lot of web stations now, webcasters are using this Chameleon processor for their on-air work. You can use it, let's say you're a church and you do live streaming. You can use it for that. All different kinds of applications for this. In fact, I've used the demo version of it as a plugin for audio production, putting together commercials and things, and using this Chameleon to sweeten up the mix a little bit. So it's a fantastic, very versatile piece of software. It actually, it's a little less expensive than the hardware version. So and every once in a while, if you keep an eye on Facebook, every once in a while, Catfish puts those on special, and you can get a good discount on this system. They also have, and the codec tab. I forgot all about that. Codec camouflage, which is really, really cool. It does a really good job of shaping the audio to fit through a codec so that you're not hearing the artifacts and squishiness from a codec. It kind of changes things like the low pass filters and things like that. But what a great little feature for people who are streaming with low bitrate streams. It really makes your audio stand out. So there you go. Hit the loudness target every time. The C6S Chameleon from Angry Audio. You can pick it up, drop them a note. They'll tell you where to get it. They also have a demo version that you can demo that allows you to try it out, and it just places some random beeps in there. But it's a good way to get your head around how it works. Really cool piece of software. Check it out today. The C6S from Angry Audio.
Every engineer should get familiar with that because there's a demo version, so you can get familiar with it. You know when its application would be correct for your customers, for your stations. Let's get ourselves educated. Thank you very much, Chris Tarr, and thanks to Angry Audio for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We got to talk about Max Connect for just a second here. You know, for years we talked about Max Connect and their wireless product, the prioritized data. And you've heard me tell about it. I've used it, yeah, and maybe you've used it too. And Chris has certainly used it. I've used it for emergencies. Other people use it, for on a regular basis to provide data to transmitter sites. Well, Max Connect also is they're a growing company, and they're able now to provide plenty of contract style engineering services, like for special projects, for studio construction, and they're doing plenty of that, for transmitter installation, for transmitter site upgrades. They're actually able to offer you tower services now too, automation installation and setup. Different connectivity solutions, streaming services, they offer that. Audio processing installation and setup, they're really good at that with the different brands of processors too. Grounding, that's a big deal that so many times we as engineers either don't have time to do right, we're not allowed to spend the money to do it right. Hey, bring in Max Connect. They will get that grounding done right. They've got the equipment to make sure it gets done right. They also can give you site monitoring and control, due diligence inspections, and have you forgotten about NRSC measurements? I know some of us kind of do. Remember that AM station you own? Yeah, well, that still has to be measured at the NRSC measurements. So check these services out. Broadcast technical solutions, engineering and integration and connectivity, all services from Max Connect. Check them out, maxconnect.com. I know it's spelled really funny. There's a link in the show notes. And they're good people. I got to send out a howdy congratulations to Max Connect's founder and president, and that's Josh Bone, and he's a proud papa. Got a new little bouncing baby boy, I believe it is. Yeah. So congratulations, Josh and Emily, his wife, on the new addition to the family. Okay, we got just a couple minutes to go. Tim Berry, I'm gonna put you in the hot seat, Mr. Berry. I need a tip of the week. What should we walk away with as a nugget of knowledge from Tim Berry in Knoxville, Tennessee?
What happens if I give you two for the price of one?
Woo! All right.
Okay.
I'll double your pay.
All right. Thought number one, it is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Especially if you're 500 miles away from your base of operations at a live event, or 2 hours away at a transmitter site. It is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Thought number two, and we've all been there with this, it applies in multiple scenarios. It is always easier to get forgiveness than it is permission.
Aha! Chris, how would you apply that to your engineering? You're on good stead with your friend who's the owner of Magnum Media.
Yeah,
but do you ever have to ask,
every once in a while I've done that. Yeah, every once in a while I've had to do that. Sometimes you're right; it's absolutely easier to do that. I do have a quick tip, something that I've been working on, and who knows? I thought I was being clever. Somebody may have already been doing this, but one of the issues we've been having, or that we've been wanting to solve, is how to monitor our streams in house. So not just through the interface that we have through our apps. So I bought some of those small, you can find them all over the place on Amazon, those low power, cheap PC boxes. They're like these little pucks. And using all pretty much free or close to free software, VLC, the Pura silent sensor, and some virtual audio cables, I can monitor 4 streams at once on a box and get silent sensing, which is really, really cool. And it's a sweet way to monitor all of your streams because you can do it in the building. So you're able to make sure that at least your encoder is working, because that's the thing, is we'd have an encoder crash and we wouldn't know. So this monitors, and if the encoder crashes, it disconnects VLC, the silence sensor goes off, and I get notified. And it costs us maybe $100 in a computer and software. And to monitor 4 streams. So I have, I bought like 4 or 5 of these, and I monitor all of 20 or whatever of our streams with these. So it's a really cool way to do it.
Have you gotten a little bit good at like starting VLC from a command line switch, so you're enabling various
yes
features?
Because that's what you have to do. Yeah, and that's what you have to do to get the right sound card. because I use
Yes,
these
you're right.
virtual sound cards. So yeah, you have to launch it with a command line to make sure that it's bringing up the right stream and sending it to the right audio output for the Pura device.
And I know that every different streaming CDN has different little features and gizmos or things that they offer. A lot of them offer to check your streams, but if you like, for example, our CDN for most of our stations is SecureNet systems. They'll check your streams for you, but only every few minutes, not constantly. So if your internet at a station is down or your encoder goes down for a good 15 minutes, I'll get a text, right?
And we've found that it doesn't tell us necessarily. It just knows that the stream is not functioning correctly. We don't know if it's silent, if it's if the encoder crashed, if it's working inside of the building. So this is a good if it trips that alarm, it monitors right off of that computer. There's an encoder on that computer that it monitors. So that streaming machine we know is down.
Here, I'm gonna move my camera. This will make your socks roll up and down. That's a web page from our streaming service provider.
Oh,
these
cool.
are all of our stations in Mississippi that are all streaming, and we get levels. I can click on any one of those, and it will send that audio instantly without any connection delay. It's like they're all connected, and it shows me metadata and encoder status for all these different radio stations. Isn't that cool? And also shows me where the listeners are.
Very cool.
Cool. And we went for the longest time without even knowing. Sorry about all that. Without even knowing that SecureNet would do that. And I don't know, 2-3 years ago, they probably didn't. So they keep adding stuff. And my point is not an ad for SecureNet, but check with your streaming provider, folks. Not you necessarily, Chris, but check with and maybe they offer, some more things like that, or maybe they offer nothing.
Sure.
So
Cool.
Who knows? All right. Tim Barry, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate you. And thanks, Chris Tarr, for being with us. What a great show. Appreciate everybody being here. Got that. Yeah, there's the 3-shot. Thanks very kindly.
What an honor to be here. Thank you very much.
Would love to have you back on, especially talk about the whole ABIP thing with some other folks. I got to give a big shout out to Suncast. That dude is so on the ball. And Tim, I'm sorry we didn't get to your ham radio website. I will put that in the show notes so people can see it, but we'll try to hit that next time. But thanks to Suncast for being quick on the draw, bringing things up as we needed them. We got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week